grandfather taught caliphs what govern meant. To Ali, how precious and sacred the word govern meant. Rise up, O Mahdi, and establish your government. For to leave you like the people of Kufa, would we dare, master? How would we, after years of waiting for our dear master? I write a letter and I begin it with, Dear Master. Knowing that breaks your heart, not a strong ummah but a weakened one, not a strong orphan or widow but a weakened one. How many of us are still waiting for you, the awakened one? How many of us are still waiting for you, the awakened one, to topple the values of Bani Umayyah, to topple the values of Banu Umayyah? Many thanks to the poet Nouri Sardar for what we call in Arabic an ubudiyya. Translated to English means that every 3 lines the end word would sound quite similar, and the last line would be quite different and leading on to the next stanza. But inshallah we can delve into that when we do have a poet onto the show. You're watching Light Our Nights with myself, Ali Fadhil, every night for the next couple of nights, up until we lead to the birth of our awaited Savior, Imam al-Mahdi Ajjallahu Ta'ala Farajahu al-Sharif. And essentially the whole aim of these nights is not an extensive dialogue or philosophical conversation about Islam or isolation or quarantine. Essentially what the whole aim of these discussions is to really get an insight into public speakers, i.e. those within the commemoration of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, from Quranic reciters to poets to nasheed reciters, all the way to public speakers. I would love to get an insight into their thought process, their decision-making process. Practically speaking, what do they go through on a day-to-day perspective, from invitation all the way to wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and they come off from the pulpits or from the place where they're reciting. To give you the benefit, the viewer essentially, the benefits of understanding what is the process. A step-by-step guide to becoming a reciter, to becoming a Quranic reciter, to becoming a public speaker, to becoming a poet. And many other forms of, inshallah, of artistic poetry or artistic expression in regards to the Ahlul Bayt. So you're watching Imam Hussaini TV exclusively with myself, Ali Fadhil. And tonight, I am delighted to be joined by another form of expression when it comes to commemorating the Ahlul Bayt, for they are the walking, talking Quran on this earth. And that being the very famous brother Zuhair Hussaini, who lives in the New York area. So I'd like to welcome brother Zuhair. Assalamu alaikum. Brother Zuhair.
Wa alaikum salam, Ali. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, alhamdulillah. Isolation as it is, so alhamdulillah we settled into a bit of a routine. But I hear, unfortunately, it's not very good news your end.
Yeah, numbers are rising, but we try to keep our dosage of news at a minimum and keep our hopes up high, inshallah.
Inshallah. And what better times than the return of the awaited Savior, Ajjallahu Ta'ala Farajahu al-Sharif. And of course we are celebrating his birth in the next couple of days. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're finding from social media is there's a new gathered wave of spirituality and really connecting with the Imam. So hopefully there is some sort of solution to our problems, specifically Corona, and to be honest with you, on a basic level, we miss socializing, we miss going out to majalis, we miss seeing our friends, our family, essentially. And so inshallah there's a resolution soon. But we once again, look, thank you so much for your time. And as I mentioned in the introduction, Zuhair, the whole aim of today, and I'm really delighted to have a Quranic reciter, because I'd love to get an insight and really pick your brains of what makes you tick, what's your thought process, what decisions you make from a Quranic perspective, and how this relates to expressions. A bit of a background regarding yourself in terms of how you started Quranic recitations, when you started. So I'd love to hear that, Zuhair.
Yeah, so I began reciting the Quran on age 9, just as another kid in madrasa, learning the recitation in the Holy Quran. And then I would give adhan, so I knew I had a potential to recite and the voice capability. And then I recited at a funeral at my father pressured me to go recite in public, and I was very I didn't want to, but then I caved in. I went, and I realized I like doing this. I like reciting. And from then that point on, I spent different programs in the masjid, wuladat, shahadat, and so on a weekly basis I recite Quran, and through time I became something I'd love to do.
Fantastic. So you mentioned something that actually quite resonates with me, because my father also pushed me into a certain direction, albeit that my mother is a reciter and my father is a public speaker, and so naturally kind of I went into that course as well. But from your perspective, and I asked this question to both Saleh Damani and Sayyid Ali Hakim, and both of their responses was that my father is a reciter, his father's father is a reciter, and it's within our generation. From your perspective, is that the case in terms of Quranic reciters?
In my case, it's not. From my understanding, my father and my grandfather were into Quran recitation, all the reciters in the community, or they recite poetry in Farsi, but Quran recitation wasn't a tradition from my forefathers.
Okay. And so that you kind of broke the mold then? And
yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so you started at the age of 9, typically in madrasa, and you recited the adhan, and that's where you found a bit of a love for reciting. Number one, you've acknowledged that maybe you have a talent in this area, and number two, what I quite like about that is that you were given the opportunity to express yourself. So how many opportunities were you given from a community center perspective to recite Quran?
So with regards to Quran, the opportunities were there. At that time, I was also reciting, Nohas as well. Okay. And in that department, I wasn't given as much as freedom or mic time. And it was and the thing is, when I think back, there was no other Quran reciter. So there's no one else to really take that spot, and I ended up reciting. But I also delved into other things, and in that space, I wasn't given many opportunities, but with Quran, it was great. And then in 2013, I went to my first competition in Iran, so that helped out a lot. Although I was unprepared for it. In Tehran, in Iran.
Oh, in Tehran, Iran. Oh, fantastic. Yes. Okay.
And I knew I wasn't prepared for it. And this is a competition I'd watch every year, like religiously. It was a week long, the week before the Mab'ath, and I'd be watching this from across the world. And it was a big thing for me, and then I finally got to go. And I knew I wasn't ready, but I still went because I wanted to experience the environment and just soak it all in.
Okay. How did you do?
I thought I did great, but I didn't do very well at all. I think I placed on the middle percentile. But the good thing I got back was that I made a lot of connections and networking with other reciters as well as teachers. And I kept in contact with them, and that helped me really grow and progress in my recitation career.
What particular style did you have at age 9, if you don't mind me asking? 9, 10, 11?
So everyone in the community would listen to Abdul Basit al-Manshawi. And yes, they are superior reciters. And I was like, I'm tired of listening to these guys. There's other people out there. And I actually, I, as much as I love them, for the first bit, I was imitating Manshawi. And then I went to YouTube, and I was like, I found a whole world of other Egyptian reciters, like Raghib Mustafa Ghalwash, and I'm listening, and he had a very distinct style. So I'm listening to this, I'm like, this is unbelievable. How come no one listens to this? It's amazing. And then I found Shahat, and slowly I found all these other reciters, and I began to listen to them to see what I can do with that by listening, seeing what I can do and what can I imitate from these reciters. So I'd say these are the reciters which I chose to imitate and base my recitation off of.
And so at that age, you were able to distinguish between reciters?
This happened a few years later.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe around age 12, 13. But I could distinguish between the reciters, but not so much melodies or composing a recitation. And what I did was just imitate. I take like a 20-30 minute recitation they had done. I broke it down. I listened to it daily, and I began to imitate it as my thing, as my trophy to look forward to.
Okay. This is very, very interesting, because a lot of the time when it comes to Quranic reciters, they, as you mentioned, they mimic, which I think for the first part is okay. You need to form some sort of style, and then you'll find yourself couple of years down the line, right?
Right.
So from yourself, when did it reach a stage where you're able to actually compose your own recitations? Because that's a very, very difficult skill to do.
I think the years right before I went to the competition, I'd spend time to break down these recitations, what melodies being used. I remember at the beginning I had a really hard time, and the thing is I never had a teacher to really show me the ropes. I had no mentor. Let me correct myself. I had people to go to for knowledge and information every now and then, but I didn't have anyone to sit once a week, twice a week, and go back to back 101. I had nothing like that. So I had to go online and search for whatever I could find with regards to both. This is not just recitation as far as melody in public, but just learning to recite the Quran with tajweed and proper recitation rules. I didn't have. So when I looked up online to see how these melodies, what they are, how they even come to existence, and things of this nature, I'd break down the recitations and say, okay, from this point to this point, he's reciting an X melody, and this point he goes on to another melody, and then I began to, and this is what if it comes to the Quran, most of it's listening. You have to consume all that information, all that recitation, to begin to have a palette to then create a recitation.
That's the word. That was the word. Exactly the word I was going to use, because a lot of melody and composing recitations, and a lot of it, as you're right, it's listening and being able to fine tune your ear so that any melody that you hear, you can compartmentalize it and say this is maqam or melody of so and so. And the way I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I see it, it's like taste buds in your mouth. So as you mentioned, the palate. So if I taste something sour, I'd know this is sour just from the taste. But it's a similar way when it comes to training the ear.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Training the ear. Or call it a music ear. You pick up on a tone or a melody, like instantly you know what it is, what's going on, for the most part.
That's such a blessing to have. I'm actually in awe. The only reason why is because I've dabbled with maqamat, they're called, right? I've dabbled with melodies, and for the life of me, obviously, you need to spend time with this. It's not just as simple as listening to one or two maqamat and thinking that you have it. No, it needs dedication, constantly listening to that maqam after maqam after maqam, so that you really be able to fine tune your ear. And I can't for the life of me just begin to listen to. I mean, the way I would relate it to it is obviously Arabic nohas, specifically Iraqi nohas, like Basim Karbala, for example. Right. He would use different maqamat, 100%. Right. But I could make a list of certain recitations which were, I know, for example, this is Hijaz, 100%. Yeah, or I know, for example, this would be Nahawand, or this would be a different type of maqam. But then, if he doesn't recite that particular latmiya, I wouldn't know if it's that particular maqam or not. And so that's where I struggled a bit when it comes to maqamat. However, that was back in the day, and now, alhamdulillah, a bit better. I can at least begin to decipher which is which. So tell me, tell me from your career now as a Quranic reciter. This is now the step-by-step guide which we talked about, and so you receive a call or a WhatsApp or a message. Brother Zuhair, we'd like to invite you to recite Quran for us at so-and-so event at so-and-so time in a couple of weeks. What's your initial thoughts as soon as you get that message?
So first thing, how much time am I being allotted? How much time am I being given? What's the type of event? The environment, the crowd. How important? Not so much as far as how important the event is, but rather just what kind of setting it is. And then I make some requests. I always ask if I could have a place to sit to recite the Quran, because it's easier with breath capacity. Sometimes it's not possible, and you just have to. And then if it's not possible, that changes things, because I can no longer take the risks of reciting a longer line, or I change the style of recitation. For example, if it's an iftar, Sheikh Ramadan's coming up, and usually I mean, this year will be different because everyone's home, but there's many events in New York City. They'll have iftars or fundraisers, and they'll have someone, and they'll invite me to recite, and it all depends. Like, we have two different types of recitation styles. We have murattal and mujawwad. Mujawwad's the slower version where you illustrate the melody more. Murattal is, faster. The recitation you typically hear, in a prayer in Mecca and Medina, the fast pace. And sometimes the setting is not correct for either one, because, people are they paying attention or they're not paying attention, and the whole point is just to get some Quran recitation in. So first,
let me hold you there.
Yeah,
hold you there,
go
'cause
ahead.
I want to backtrack, because you mentioned so many terms there which went literally over my head. So there's murattal.
Yeah, there's different schools. Like, there's murattal and mujawwad. Another way to put it is, and I mix it up because it's hadr, tahqiq, and tadwir, which is there's an extra one in there because it's like a really, really fast-paced one. Like, the whole point is to finish the Quran in like a day type of thing.
Really?
Yeah, but the whole point is the slower one.
Please, can you give me just a quick excerpt? Just.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. It's just going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
All right. Okay. Yeah. And then you mentioned there's a slow one.
Yeah, the slow one, which, Abdul Basit, I mean, they all recite both of them, but the slow one, which we're most accustomed to, you'd hear at a funeral or at a presentation, it's more a presentation style recitation.
Okay.
There's a waladat, you have someone go up and recite that slower one.
Okay. And that's where, for example, you can give a bit more of an emphasis on the art and the performance.
Exactly.
Rather than
the melody, exactly. There's more leeway into illustrating the melody, and it's harder because you need to have the melody knowledge or capacity to insert in there. So
all right.
It's like choose your, I don't want to say choose your poison, but choose your set of
challenges.
Challenges.
Yeah, challenges.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. So you've got the invitation. You want to understand obviously the setting, and it's important for you because you mentioned something very important as well in terms of how much you can risk your voice, whether you're standing up or you're sitting down. We're going to get on that in a bit, because breath capacity is something that I want to talk about a bit more, because it relates to reciters as well. And so, okay, so all of that is done and dusted. You've managed to negotiate in the sense that you want to sit down ideally, and what's the setting, what's the style of events. So I've seen you, for example, in Ummah, and they give you a good platform. So you've got the time, you've got the spotlights, you've got the mic as well. So that's where you can really be able to express yourself from a Quranic perspective. But then, have there been any instances where you're thinking, like, this is going to be really difficult, like, but I have to. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of spaces. I've had to. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say you came to London, and I think you came to Diwan and Kafil.
Yeah, Diwan.
We looked after you.
Alhamdulillah, everything was great. There's another whole dynamic to this. Yes, some places where I don't have to worry about a single thing, and that's like the best. Best environment where I don't have to worry about mic. In my own center, I have to worry about the mic. I have to, I'm the one preparing everything. But sometimes I find that, like a difficult place, I've had to recite in a moving car and in the procession in Manhattan for Muharram, that's
God.
That's a real difficult one. But alhamdulillah, it's nice to be, experience something new. But there are times where, and maybe I'm jumping ahead of myself, but it could be like at my own center, I always, the nerves kick in big time. Really? Some places the nerves, I'm so relaxed, like it's almost this kind of energy I feel from the crowd or from the environment. And the moment I sit down and begin reciting, I'm like, this is I don't sense positive. It's not that it's the crowd's fault. It's just like the space. Sometimes it's just too much pressure,
It's the vibe. You can't.
Yeah, the vibe. And years after reciting, it's still like I can't just sit up there. I'm like, I'm gonna kill. Like, yes, like I'll carry the confidence up there, But once you're sitting there, it's like, oh man, how am I gonna? How is this gonna play out?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's a tough one.
So I mean, I can talk about, well, we can discuss this for hours and hours, I think. But in the interest of time, okay, so you've got the dates of the event, and let's just say the setting is ideal for you in terms of the lighting, the mic, the platform that you're going to be reciting in. What's your thoughts leading up to that day? What's the process of your preparation?
So once I know all the information, I then choose what I'm going to recite.
Mm-hmm.
I open the Quran and I look at the verses which I choose to recite. Let's say, let's just say it could be whatever. It's a page long. I then open a translation, multiple translations, and look at from the beginning to end. What's the verse? What are the verses talking about? What's the concept here? And then I break it down each verse, and compartmentalize each verse into different segments. For example, I can't think of an example actually right now, but let's say you basically break down the verse and decide, before I do that, holistically what melodies I'm going to recite based on what's the concept or the translation of the verse. Once I have that, and then I decide at the first line, where I begin, where I end, both from a meaning standpoint, so the meanings are always intact, and a melody perspective. For example, within one verse, there may be two concepts. I distinguish between these two, or I don't distinguish. It all depends what my intention is, what kind of expression, how am I expressing it to the crowd for them to take in. It could be, an example that comes into my mind, a dua. ربنا إننا سمعنا ربنا فاغفر لنا وربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا. It's the same verse, but I stop at ربنا فاغفر لنا. Then I go back. Then ذنوبنا. It's just different parts of expressing it differently. Another verse, Surah Al-Qadr, the verse about how this night is equal to 1,000 nights. There's different ways to basically break this down and play with it with the melody. And once I got that to a good degree, I then recite it and record myself. I listen to it, and I see, okay, what did I do here? What did I accomplish? If I'm happy with it, which is rarely, I'm okay, we could go back and change this a little. And basically keep listening to this, even though, a week before, a day before, every day. And this melody then finds a space in my memory. So now when I go up to recite, I know how this recitation is going to be. And it's the more preparation I do, and sometimes it's not as elaborate as this because things get in the way and I don't get to prepare as much. But the more practice I have, the less anxious and anxiety I am when I'm reciting, because there's so many things I have to control. Recitation from a tajweed perspective, my breath, my melody, and the slightest things can really
Throw you off.
Throw me off big time, especially the way you begin, because you have to be on the right pitch. If you're off, then you're going to suffer the entire recitation. It's not dua where you could instantly just bring down your voice and everyone's like, it's okay. Even Lakmees, I noticed they sometimes do that, but it's like, okay, he does it, and everyone goes on with their life.
Yeah.
Quran recitation, you do it, it sounds like a bit like someone scratching on the chalkboard. It's like, oh, what just happened? The tune just goes off.
Yeah. And it's definitely, unfortunately for you, but it's definitely discernible. You can hear it. Like even a person without a musical ear can suddenly say, "Oh, like that doesn't sound right in my ear." Like
exactly.
Right, yeah. So okay, this is perfect because now we've got a step-by-step guide. So first and foremost, you look at a particular page actually first before that, what makes you? Do you match a certain event with a page from the Quran? How does it work with your selection process?
Yes and no. It depends. Sometimes if it's a wiladat, let's just say, 15th of Sha'ban's coming up, I'll look at verses pertaining to the 12th Imam, That's one way to do it. The famous one, Surah Al-Qasas, ونريد أن نمن. Sometimes I don't care about that at all. And there's this, it may be a verse I heard a few weeks ago or something I heard. I was like, you know what? I want to really inform the crowd or place emphasis on this, or it's something that's important to me. A verse that I found a good relationship with, and if they haven't asked me to pick a certain verse, then I just make the decision and go about it.
Do they sometimes pick for you?
Yes, we're starting a university setting, and the event is about social justice or something pertaining, and then they tell me, hey, can you take these verses, which makes my life kind of easy, but I just play with the melody, and so it does definitely happen. Yeah.
And then how would you choose a certain melody for words? I know you mentioned, I just want to talk a bit more about that. I know you mentioned the melody is based on the translation or the concept, the concept, right? So what melodies, actually now we're on that topic, could you break down some of the melodies for us?
Recite them?
No, recite them. What are they specifically? And if you can recite them, absolutely, please.
So you have 7 maqamat. You have 7 main maqamat.
Yep.
You have, let's see, Bayati, Nahawan, Hijaz, Saba, Sikka, Ajam, Jaharka, or Jaharga. And these are like the 7 different, let's look at it this way, 7 different colors.
Okay.
You can mix these colors and create all these other kinds of things. And that's when you can have all these different combinations. Sometimes in one verse or one recitation segment, you'll include 3 different melodies.
Really?
In
one sentence.
Yeah. But you have to be a master at this to really
I know.
Because, as I said before, the way these melodies work, they're like a family. You have to attach them correctly, and if you don't, you go off tune. And
could you just randomly select, or do they have some maqamat only compatible with others?
Some maqamat, because it depends on the note and where the note is, where they could easily connect with each other.
Okay.
You could force it, but it's going to sound weird. That's the thing.
Right.
I'm referring to a Mujarrad recitation, which is the slow one. It begins with Bayati. This is like almost every 99% of recitation. So
give us an example.
So you give Bayati, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And this is Qarar, which is low. Low, you have Jawab and Jawab, which is the high. So you start low. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So, another important point that comes to Quran is the qafla. The qafla is the end word. And the way you end this is being very technical, but I want to give everyone an idea of how
detailed
and vast this is. The qafla, you could mess up the entire 90%, but if you do well in the qafla, people are going to remember that.
Okay.
However, if you do amazing on the 90%, beginning to 80%, and then the last time you lose breath, you're like, that's it. The entire thing, you just might as well just.
So give me an example give me an example of a good qafla.
So here, and before I do that, here, like I said, mean, that's portraying that this melody is not done. There's more to come. Or I end the melody. For example, I'm gonna try to recite the entire Surah Fatiha, each verse different melodies. I'm gonna pull it up just in case I don't lose. So we'll start from Bayati. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Now, the other thing is, because it's short, I have to do another one before I can end it. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Now I can continue on a different chapter of Bayati, or a different shade of it, or I go to another one. Malik Yawmiddin.
Okay. Okay.
This is the Rust. So now I'm moving on to a different melody. And if I do another one, yeah, can. So with the Rust. Now this is typically every recital because Bayati Rust, or after they finish the first layer of Bayati, then they'll go even deeper into it. And Bayati is like it's like a melody you could spend minutes.
Yeah.
And for like there's Mustafa Ismail, famous Egyptian reciter, he spends 20 minutes in there in that melody before he goes to another one. He find all kinds of corners and shades of this melody to really, and it's incredible to see. Like he's known for it, and then he goes on to different. So so we did Rust, and then what I used to do, for example, I used to struggle with going high because I didn't know that I could do it until the Egyptian mentor I had pushed me. This is right before the competition. I went to him every day. I was like, listen, and he lived in the city. I was like, I need to come to you every day. I have and he actually had gone to the competition in 1993 and got second place. So he knew about it and he knew the stakes.
Okay.
So he's helping me out and he's giving me. He's like, don't worry about this. This is all it's about. And since I couldn't go high, I would then go to Jiharka, the other melody, which is a very sweet and melody you recite at happy events or a happy verse, a verse about Jannah. And I would resort to this. It sounds great, but it's kind of a cover for me because I can't go high. Then I got over this and I went high because you try to hit the high note of that melody as well, and then go to the different melody. Don't just leave it, hanging around and not completing its essence.
Yeah.
So, إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. And then you continue on, and then you go high, and then you may go to Sada, which is a sad one, Hijaz. So these are different ones you could pair it up with.
If you could relate something that we would possibly know, the layman, to a maqam, so that we can bring it a bit closer to our ears, could you? I'll give you an example. I was listening to a video once, and then the video had all 7 maqamat, and he had a poem. So he was reciting the maqamat in a poem, which basically explains the description of each maqam. But when he finished one maqam, he'll go to the other, but changing the maqam. So, for example, he'll say, مقام الرصد والعجم جميل. And then he'll go, كذا سيك به فن أصيل. And then, وبعد يوم الصبا نشيد حزن. Anyway, so then he reached one part, which I thought, okay, now it kind of makes sense. He reached Hijaz, and then he goes, ولحن بالأذى ولحن بالحجاء. Anyway, he recited almost like he recited the adhan. So the next way, in that poem, he said the adhan is basically the maqam of Hijaz. Yeah. Is that correct in saying?
Yeah, adhan is usually recited in Hijaz, which is like Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah. So
that's yeah. And so he went through the poem explaining the maqam. When he went through the maqam, he would actually recite that maqam itself. So I don't know if I was off key. I'm not sure. I tried.
No, you're fine.
So could you relate certain things that we could relate to in day-to-day stuff?
Adhan is definitely one. I'm trying to think. It's hard. The only way anyone would be able to gather or comprehend it is if they've listened to it, and they have a reference point for it.
Okay.
For example, there's a famous recitation of Rabbana by a Iranian singer, Shajarian. He's taken 4 verses of Rabbana. Usually play on almost every Iranian television right before iftar, right before Maghrib, and yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Okay,
and he, that's like the closest thing I could think of. There's other examples as well, but that's like a brilliant expression of. And he goes between different maqamat, and it's like a work of art.
Really,
that's the thing. Anyone, if I were to recite like Jahabka, then they can relate to it. But that's the only way to put, I guess, A and B together is to have that memory of that melody.
Yeah, and so I guess maybe with the whole sad part, if you listen to a Quranic recitation that sounds a bit sad, you can say that's probably sabah.
Exactly, like the Iraqi style of Quran recitation is very sad, and it's very hazan, and that's usually Sada, or there's another one called Maqam Dashti, which is like an off branch of Bayati, and it's also the sad melody, and that comes from Saba. So that's like the only way I could think of where someone has to have a reference point to relate it back to.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, as I mentioned, I can really do this for hours and hours. But just in the interest of time, I got from yourself that just to recap, I think there's a bit more to it. But the selection process of the actual the verses just depends on maybe the nature of the event. Maybe someone has particularly requested a certain verse or verses, but essentially it's what you feel at that time, I guess.
Yeah.
And then number 2, once you get that particular page, you'll translate the page. How important, by the way, is to really understand the words before giving it a maqam?
From I think the most successful recitation where you fully understand the verses, in order to portray the verses to others, you as a reciter need to know what the verses contain and what they really mean and what's going on. Or else it becomes just, it's the value in the recitation, it's just, just sweet melodies and the voice, and there's no essence to it. And I'd say that's a big component. And, for example, with a hadith from Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, that the one who's reciting the Quran, you should see a sense of sadness in their face, or they should really understand what's going on with the verses. Of course, that doesn't always happen, but we should aim towards that.
Okay. So there's a translation, and you understand the concept, and then the melody is based on the actual concept itself, and then you record yourself. So you recite. You once you've understood each verse, within that verse, which part is going to be a certain maqam, where you'll go high, where you'll go low, where the qarar is, where the jawab is, where the jawab is. I just learned that from you, by the way. But where you'll find that out once you record yourself, and then you perfected it, inshallah.
Yeah.
To the best of your knowledge, to the best of your ability, you perfected it. So then they call your name up, and they say, "We'd like to now welcome Brother Zuhair Hussaini for recitation of the Holy Quran. Please welcome with Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad." What goes through your mind then as you're going up?
It's not a good feeling, actually, because it's like your mind's racing.
It never is.
It's like, okay, it's now or never. It's happening. Yeah. And either I'm calm. If I'm calm, that's like the best scenario. I go up there and I sit down, but before that, if I'm not calm and I know in a few minutes I have to get up, I find that my heart's beating fast. I'll lower my heart, the pacing by holding my breath and inhaling and exhaling to get my heart rate back at normal conditions. Because what happens if I don't have if my heart's pacing too quickly, I go up to sit down. The beginning, I don't even have enough breath to take in because I can't take that breath. So I calm myself. I go sit down, and once I feel, and this also rarely happens, I should always begin when I'm at most ease, but I don't. I just okay, I'm sitting here, let me just begin. And I kind of impair myself because mentally I'm not ready yet. It doesn't take 5-10 minutes to get ready. You sit there, you're like, okay, we're doing this, and then I can mentally prepare. The problem is that sometimes you're mentally off. You may be sitting there already, but mentally you're not there yet. And these things, but it's just so many different things to control, and you kind of have to wing. In that moment, wing it.
To be honest with you, hats off to you, because there's never a moment we think or we're in doubt that you're in your zone. And actually, on that point of being in the zone, I've been asked to recite Quran a couple of times, and I feel like you submerge yourself in the words and in the melody and trying to come up with something that people would like to listen to. And then when I finish, I think, whoa, what happened in the last 10 minutes? Like, I feel like you go into an area and then you come out of it and you don't care about what's around you. So what's it like when you're in a situation? You've started, let's just say that the scenario is you're mentally prepared, your heart rate is fine, and you've started, and what happens then? What kind of zone do you go to?
I think two things happen. Sometimes you're in the zone, and again, you feel the energy of the people. Yeah. Sometimes, they're encouraging you, and they like what they hear, and it gives me, all I need is a little dose of assurance or acceptance by their reaction, and I can feel at ease, and I can
really?
Full steam ahead.
Really?
But if I don't feel that, it's like, if I were to give you an analogy, it's like a car with a wobbly tire. It's making its way down to the end, and it could be. I think it could be the next 10 minutes, next 8 minutes can be the best thing ever, or it's like, I can't wait for this to get done. I can't wait for this to get done, and it's unfortunately it all depends on the environment and the setting.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it isn't serious. You recite. It's not what it came. It's not what you thought it'll come out. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. You learn from it. Other times you don't have that. Flexibility. If it's a competition, for example, every second of your recitation is under a microscope and gets diagnosed. So you have to be a tip-top, your A game from beginning to end, and but most people aren't under that circumstance, and that's okay. I mean but I just, and the perfectionist tendencies in me, always I criticize every little bit. And even I go recite, I'll record myself again. I'll listen to it a week later, because once I go from that didn't come out as I expected to come out, but it's okay. I listen to it a week later and make sure and see what went wrong with what.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so we touched upon very, very briefly the review process, and you said you'd a week later you'd review the recording. But I wanted to touch upon very, very quickly. I think this is last couple of messages as well. For me personally, and of course for the audience as well, breath capacity you mentioned. Tell me a bit more about that. So, ideally, you should be breathing from your diaphragm, the muscle below your stomach, and not from your chest. The best way to tell this, if you sit in the mirror and you take a deep breath and you feel your chest props up like this, then it's wrong. You should feel the muscle below the diaphragm should be the one, taking all that breath. And that's one thing. And there's some videos out there on how to do this. Singers have all these techniques, and there's nothing wrong with using their techniques after the same school. It shouldn't be neglected at all, though. Breathing.
Neglected in one way.
As in, you shouldn't just wing it, not considering your breathing control.
No, you should never wing it, because it's kind of like the oil or the gas or the fuel to your recitation. And if it's not there, if it's not giving you, like there are times where I'll plan for a long line, a line and a half, and I get up there and I realize I can't pull it off, because if I recite in my own room and do that line, I could.
You can do it 3 times over.
3 times over. I go to a place to recite, and I can't even do half of that. And this is why the conditions matter so much, because mentally, psychologically, just affect you. And psychology, that's another big thing. You may think, I can't make it. And maybe you can make it, but psychologically, you told yourself that, and next thing you know, you mess it up because you told yourself you can't make it.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there was so much more that I wanted to discuss with you, but our time unfortunately has kind of reached an end. Even though, as I mentioned before, there was two things that I wanted to discuss. Number one, the maqamat itself and its origin. Actually, on that note, could you just touch upon the origin of maqamat and perhaps where they came from?
I can't give you a historical analysis on it, but I'll tell you that, the maqamat that's used in the Quran, it shares its same background with traditional Arabic music.
Okay.
There are slight variations. For example, you won't see certain musical tones being used in the Quran. The ones used in the Quran are kind of, it kind of has its roots, and the best way these roots are judged are based off predecessor recitations of the Quran. Big time Quran experts and teachers can tell when a melody doesn't belong in Quran recitation. I remember looking at the manual judgment for the Quran competition. They said do not use tones or melodies from musical. It's so obvious when it doesn't belong there. So although you have, the way I look at it, you have all these melodies, all these shades. You look at a color wheel of different melodies that are put together. They're called ajnas, which is like Kurd or and a certain amount or a group of them are regarded for Quran recitation, while the rest are kind of used for all kinds of musical tracks or things.
Okay, that makes a bit sense. I think you've touched upon it, but there's a whole science to it. It's probably not as simple as we're discussing. But thank you for trying to simplify it. And you're right. There's a science. There's a massive science behind it, and it's not as simple as people think. It's not as simple as it's not like that at all. There's loads of intricacies that really show whether you know what you're doing or not.
Definitely.
Yeah. As I did also tell you before when we were off air, that I was going to do a bit of a quiz. Unfortunately, I got so immersed in our conversation that we actually ran out of time, and we won't have time to do the quiz. But in saying that, I'd love to have you again, maybe on a more personal sense, on my own and an Instagram account, just opening up and having a discussion with you about Quran. It's one of my passions, not in the passions where I want to do more with it, but I love listening. I love listening to people talk about it, and that's why I literally lost track of time. We were supposed to finish at 8:30 or 11:35, but now it's like 11:36. But anyway, but look, I just wanted to thank you so much for your time, for your dedication in this field. There's not a lot of people out there that are like you, unfortunately, that are quite mainstream. Exactly, we need more, and hopefully this video will give some encouragement to reciters out there who can delve into the Quranic world. I think it's definitely needed. Just actually very quickly, what about English?
English what?
So the translations. Could you possibly give it a melody or a tone or a bit of life?
People have done it with dua, and I think it just sounds. First, I would be against it, because the whole Quran and Arabic go hand in hand, but you can give it melody. It just doesn't sound right. It just sounds like it just doesn't sound. Because it doesn't sound right. No, because the thing with melody in the Quran, you have restrictions. Unlike dua and Mia, where there's flexibility and leeway. With Quran, it's much more rigid, and it's hard to then use that same thing in English as well.
Yeah, you're right. It's like forcing a square peg in a round hole. It just it doesn't fit, and musically doesn't fit, sound-wise doesn't fit as well. Yeah. But okay, look. Any last words? Any last thoughts to any of the viewers out there who maybe want to be encouraged into Quranic recitation?
I'd say if anyone, I know there's kids and people in the younger ages that have passions for it. They should propel and go forward, and not. And if there's a passion, if there's a will, there's a way. No matter how small your community is or how large it is, seek out and find people that can help you. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them the tawfiq to continue and to start such ambitions.
Inshallah, definitely. Well, look, brother Zuhair Hussaini, Many thanks for gracing light your nights. I want to thank you once again, and hopefully we see you again in London.
Inshallah.
Portraying your beauty, your manners as well, which is also part and parcel of your performance. So all the best, inshallah, and thank you so much for taking part, and we'll see you soon, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you again. Assalamu alaikum.
So, brothers and sisters, that was Hajj, brother Zuhair Hussaini. I'm sorry about the quiz, but I was so immersed in the conversation, I really did lose track of time. And there was so much more we could talk about, especially the history behind maqamat, and where they originated from, and how did they come about, and who came first, the Quranic recitation maqamat, or was it, for example, the musical? More about the breathing and the control and the selection process. But I think in summary, we got a very good understanding as to the steps it takes for a Quranic reciter, Quran reciter, to be able to portray their expertise in this field. One of the main things is practice. Practice makes absolutely perfect, and it's definitely relatable in this sense. In any case, tomorrow look out for a new segment, a new show. We will have either a poet or a reciter or a public speaker or even a Quranic reciter. Who knows? But inshallah, you'll find out tomorrow, 10:30 p.m. UK time. Light your nights with myself, Ali Fadhil. We will see you tomorrow, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي زين بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي يا قلبي طاير من ضلوعي أسرع من دموعي يحكي عن موضوعي لحسيني من صدق حبيته قلبي يشبه بيته وانا زاير جيته وبشعبان شعوبان ضوى الدنيا خده حول الزهرة بهده هذا حسين بينه وبين الله شقد موده عقل التاهي والله راد يدور والفه امشي وبيا لهفه لاهل البيت فطر سجد جنحي يريد يشفى تدري الخيمة والماي سيد كربلاء الجاي عندهن هالمسوياي مولد كربلاء زين بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي زين بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي والثاني المقترن بنفاسي باسمه رافع راسي فأنا العباسي شفوفه ما ردت ينطيني خير تارس عيني هو المربيني وبدنياي عاش وياي انا زوجة كامل ارسم يا ابو فاضل حيدر بيه ومربي حلال المشاكل للكرار وارث صاري معنى وثباته من اول حياته حيدر قال هالكفال يتكفل خواته عباس الميادين تربية ام البنين فرحة قلب الحسين مولد كربلائي بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي زين بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي الثالث قلبي غنى ونادى ويفجر ميلاده هلا بزين السادة سبحانه خالقه سبحانه جمع كل حسانه وانبت بوجدانه السجاد والعباد كلها تظل وراءه ما يقطع رجائه يدعي هواي لاني بهاي الله يحب دعاءه نهر احساس وعلى الناس جفش قد تصدق يشهد للفرزدق ابن الزهرة العذراء والبطحاء تعرف وطئة الحق. يشهد للحرم كون والحلو اللي يحجون هاي الليلة يدرون مولد كربلائي.
هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي. زين بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي.
والرابع أكبر بكل معنى وابن سيد الجنة جد حيدر جنة. وعيوني والقلب ما عافر ينسحر من شافه أحمدية وصافة.
يا محلى جل الله ما خالف شبيها
لازم حكمة بيها
شبل حسين قرة عين ليلة ضيع عليها. ما مضروب حسنه يفوق الحسن البرية
درة حيدرية
يطلع غير رامي بخير من بيت الزكية. أكبر وابن الكبار فارس كربلاء صار فرحة كل الأحرار مولد كربلائي.
زين بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي. زين بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي.
والخامس هي طفلة صغيرة وبفعلها كبيرة عم ضواها الديرة. تعرفها كربلة وشافتها وردة يا معمتها وبصدق حبتها. مثل الماس بين الناس عدها المسية.
بنت حسين هي
رب الكون وحيكون تتسمى رقية. بالايام 5 أعوام صح مدة قصيرة
بس عاشت أميرة
عاشت بجف حسين جفت العشيرة. طفلة وشايل أحلام صارت وردة الشام الهم هاي الأيام مولد كربلائي.
زين بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي. زين بالسما هلال خط الفرحة مرسال مولد 5 أبطال مولد كربلائي. يا أيها الشمس التي خلف السحب فلتبزغي